UFC 207, Friday, December 30th, on pay-per-view from Las Vegas, Nevada, at the brand new T-Mobile Arena, with an attendance of 18,500 people there in downtown Las Vegas. 5 fights were shown on the pay-per-view main card, but before I get to my recap of that event, let's look over the undercard real quick. An unfortunate event in the first fight of the evening on Fight Pass, as Alex Oliveira took on Tim Means. Fight ended up going down as a no contest. There was a situation with some knees and some hand placements, and ended up being an accidental knee strike by the Dirty Bird, Tim Means. Alex Oliveira could not continue, so with the fight only going to the 3:33-minute marker in round number 1, Dan Miragliotta was forced to end the bout, and it ended up going down as a no contest. Very unfortunate, as it looked like Tim Means was starting to get the better of the Brazilian cowboy Alex Oliveira. However, that's not what happened. A little bit of an illegal knee. Again, that's knees, and with the guys playing with the one leg and hands out and all that stuff, a lot of those rules are now going to be straightened out here in 2017, with the ABC approving some modifications of the unified rules, which is I'm in favor of, so I'm glad to see that. But again, this is one of those situations where it's unfortunate for Tim Means. Sometimes you can't always tell where people's hand and foot placements always are, and for Alex Oliveira to think, oh, you should continue that. No, by no means. If you got rocked and you don't feel great and you're already getting beaten up, there's really no reason for you to go back out there to take a loss just so you can look like a warrior. So hopefully this is a fight that can get run back rather quickly, because these are two guys that are definitely very exciting, can definitely be a force in the welterweight division. So I hope it doesn't slow either up that much moving forward. Looking at the fights that were shown on FS1, 4 fights were shown on that portion of the undercard, as Nico Price with a huge upset victory over Brandon Thatch. Price making his UFC debut, submitting Brandon Thatch in the first round via arm triangle choke. And for Thatch, a guy that was once a very prominent prospect, came into the UFC undefeated, had won his first, I think, 2 or 3 fights. I think he even knocked out... he only had 1 loss coming into the UFC. That was back in Strikeforce in 2008. Then he came in knocking out Justin Edwards and Paulo Thiago, both in the first round. He then had a pretty long layoff from getting hurt in November of 2013, not fighting again till 2015, ended up being the main event of a fight night right there in his hometown and where he trains there, in just outside of Denver in Broomfield, Colorado, and ended up taking on former UFC lightweight champion Benson Henderson. Had a great fight, but ended up getting choked out there in the 4th round. Then he got submitted in the first round by Gunnar Nelson. Had a not a great performance against Sayer Badaduruza. Got submitted in the 3rd round, and then in this one got submitted in the 3rd round. All variations of a choke. The last 2 being arm triangle chokes, and these the first 2 being rear naked chokes. So obviously that's Brandon Thatch's Achilles heel again. He came into the UFC with a record of 9-1, improved that to 11-1. Has now lost 4 straight, dating back to February of 2015. And even though he had a really exciting start, I imagine he's going to get cut. He still has some promise left. I don't think he's completely done in his career, but obviously right now things are not working, and chances are he's probably going to have to go to another organization, whether that's RFA, whether that's Bellator, whether that's World Series of Fighting. Somebody's going to find a home, because he definitely has a lot of finishing ability, but right now he really hasn't been able to showcase this, and guys have really been able to take the fight right to him in the ground game, and he has showed that that's a really weak part of the game, and really since February of 2015 really hasn't been able to show much improvement in that category. So that's obviously, if he wants to be successful and have a little more of a career, he's got to kind of shore up the defense a little bit, because getting submitted 4 straight fights, it's one thing to lose 4 fights, but to get finished in each and every one, obviously there is a problem, and he hasn't been able to address it yet. Also looking at the undercard, Antonio Carlos Jr. against Martin Venori. First round I thought was pretty even. I probably would have gave to Carlos Jr. Second round was definitely for Vettori, who really dominated Carlos Jr. Some really great ground and pound. Ended up outstriking the Brazilian 34-14 in that round. And the final round, I definitely would have gave to Carlos Jr. Even though Vettori did outstrike Carlos Jr. 27-16, Carlos was able to land 2 takedowns in that round. And I think that he had more control, and none of the strikes were that impactful. So I kind of see the third round. However, when you really look at it, Vettori had a great fight. I mean, he outstruck Carlos Jr. 99-44. He also, for the most part, shut him down. Only 4 takedowns out of 13 attempts. Vettori had the 1. The judges kind of favor the control here. It was, however, unanimous. All of them did take a 29-28. Really, that second round was Vettori's best round, where he was really able to get on top. And I think just the threat of the takedown is really what helped Carlos Jr. I mean, this wasn't a great victory. I think for Vettori, he should hold his head up high. Because, yeah, he lost the fight, but he went in there with a great jiu-jitsu expert, really shut him down, even took him down, and pounded him pretty well in the second round. I think it was really a case of not being able to get his weapons untied enough to push the fight in his favor. I really think it was a very close fight. I think the first round you could have gave him as well. All judges did score 29-28, but I think that was, to me, that wasn't a for sure round for Carlos Jr. So I think for Vettori, only his second fight in the UFC, I think he's got to hold his head high because he went in there with a guy that is a world-class grappler and was able to come out not even coming, close to getting submitted. So I think he's got to hold his head up there high. And for Carlos Jr., honestly, it wasn't really that great a performance. I mean, 4-13, he only landed like 44 strikes in 15 minutes. Not a great pace. Really wasn't trying that much for submissions, really just looking for control. And guys that are better in this division, they're not going to allow you to do that. They're going to get off quicker, they're going to make you pay, and they're probably going to put you away if you put that type of performance away. So for Carlos Jr., yes, he got the win against a younger guy in the organization, but if he wants to take on top talent in this division, he needs to bring a way better performance than that. Neil Magny against Johnny Hendricks. Now, I know a lot of fans were booing there in Las Vegas when it came down for Neil Magny. Again, unanimous decision, all judges scoring at 29-28. But after watching, I heard the reaction on Twitter first, and then I went back after the main event of 207 and watched this fight. And to me, I thought this was pretty clear for Neil Magny. I think the only round I would have gave Hendricks round 2, landed those 3 takedowns, landed some decent ground and pound, outstruck Magny 26-10. Round 1, even though Hendricks landed a takedown, Neil Magny did land one of his own as well. Hendricks didn't do a lot with that position, only landed 15-24, whereas Neil Magny, I thought, was really attacking from the bottom, had a nice triangle choke / armbar attempt there towards the end, outstruck Hendricks 38-15 in that round, and was way more active, throwing 30 more strikes at 54. So I really thought he had that first round again. Round 2 was definitely Johnny Hendricks, and round 3 I thought was more of the same. Again, Hendricks landed 2 more takedowns, ended up being 6-7. That part of his game was fine. But 52-76, that's a good rate, but the 76, that's not what's good. Because Neil Magny landed 96. He landed 20 more strikes than Johnny Hendricks threw. He threw up 139. Even though he got taken down, he was not allowing that to be the end-all be-all. He tried for another submission there in the third, a combination armbar, triangle choke again. And, was elbowing, he was doing something. Now, again, Johnny Hendricks is a great wrestler. He was able to control Neil Magny. If this was a wrestling match, he would have won because he put Neil Magny continuous on his back, and Magny didn't get up that many times. However, this is not a wrestling match. This is MMA. You got to do more than just take people down and hold them there. And I think Neil Magny was doing the best he could, being in a non-advantageous position, trying for submissions, trying to do damage, and to me really tried to end this fight. Whereas Johnny Hendricks just tried to control this fight. So I see the judges went with damage over control, output, over the takedowns, striking output over the takedown and ground control, and I totally agree with this. And for Johnny Hendricks, this is a guy that I think not only has lost his motivation, but I think is just done. I know Wake, again, he had to face the scale once again. He had to challenge that obstacle before he ever stepped into the octagon against Neil Magny. Once again, he failed at that. And I don't know, ever since he won the title, I don't know if that went to his head or but he has definitely not been the same fighter since he became the UFC champion at UFC 171, and it shows. Since becoming the champion in March of 2014, he has now only won one fight in his last 5, and he had that situation where he was unable to fight and had to cancel just days before at, I believe that was UFC, I'm not sure of the event number, but it was going to be in October of 2015. That was when Daniel Cormier fought Alexander Gustafsson. I forget the exact numbering of that event. But, again, so really that, I don't know if he would have won or lost that fight. So really he had 6 scheduled fights since becoming the champion. Obviously he had the great fight there against Robbie Lawler. Beat Matt Brown, very controlling fashion, but got knocked out by Stephen Thompson, had a very poor performance against Calvin Gastelum, and now another, to me, kind of phoned-in type performance here against Neil Magny. Now, if he moves up to 185, could he get a renewed spirit? Because he doesn't have to cut all the weight? Possibly, but this just looks like a guy that just is trying to collect a paycheck. This is a guy that doesn't, to me, have that desire of being a champion. This is not the guy that had won 6 consecutive fights to get a shot at George St. Pierre and then subsequently win the title 5 months later. This is not the same guy. So, I don't know what he needs to do. I don't know if he needs to retire. He is 33 years old now. I know that most people that's super old, but he does have 23 professional fights. He's been fighting in the UFC, or actually, if you go back, he actually started in the WEC back in 2008. That was 9 years ago, or will be 9 years in December. That's a long time. And I remember an article saying, when you get creeping up that 9 years in the sport of MMA, that seems to be, regardless of what age you started, but when you hit 9 years in, that seems to be kind of most guys' dropping off point. And Johnny Hendricks is only a few months away from that. So, does he pack it in? Does 185 invigorate him? But to me, he's got to change everything about his game if he wants to win. He has to start getting to be more well-rounded like he was when he was fighting Telly. He's got to work on his diet. He's got to work on his mentality. He's just got to work on his lifestyle and maybe just take some time off and maybe not even, I think he should train a little bit, at least maybe more focus on strength and conditioning, but maybe just take 6 months off and just work on strength and conditioning. Just maybe not even do anything related with a martial art for a while and just get your head clear and, like I said, get your diet, mentality, your lifestyle right. And then maybe after 6 months, if you feel good, then let's, decide that what weight class you're going to fight at, number 1, number 2, and then let's get a fight on the books. Because right now, it's not working for him. Let's get to the main card here of UFC 207, kicking off first here with Ray Borg against Louis Smolka in the flyweight division. Now, it came out, at least to me, after the fight, that Smolka was battling through some cold and flu-like symptoms. Obviously, Ray Borg had some issues with weight. He did miss weight by a few pounds. Smolka, despite the illness and the missed weight by Borg, decided to take the fight anyway. And it definitely showed because this was not the Louis Smolka we saw rattle off, wins over Ben Wynn and Patty Houlihan and Neil Sear and Richie Vasilek. This is not the guy who had won 4 out of his last 5 fights. And I think for Louis, considering how his fight went, getting caught in that submission so quickly against an unknown guy coming off the Ultimate Fighter and Brendan Moreno, he wanted to get right back in there, try to erase that loss, erase the upset, and try to get back on the winning track. And I think, not saying he shouldn't have took the fight because he's a guy that signed to take the fight, and he's not, as far as I know, I don't think he's ever pulled out of a fight. And I think he wanted to keep that up. I don't blame him. Obviously, Ray Borg is a guy who's had some injury problems, obviously a weight issue for this fight, and with Smolka's desire to try to get back on the winning track, took the fight, but you could just tell he was not the same guy. He got taken out 4 of 8 times, got really controlled this fight, only threw 53 strikes. That's not the typical output for Smolka. I've seen him do that in 1 round. Heck, I've seen him do that in about a half a round. So this was not the same guy. I mean, he was controlled up against the cage. He was taken down several times, and normally in those positions where you would see him really scramble, switch positions, get into a more advantageous position, whether that was through strikes or through submission attempts, it just wasn't there for him, and he just wasn't the same guy physically. And Ray Borg, a guy that did miss weight, didn't have to cut those extra pounds, might have been a little more fresh had he actually made 125. He did put on a typical Ray Borg performance. He really went after the takedowns. He was tenacious. He was great on top. But I don't think this was the real Louis Smolka. I think that illness definitely affected him, and he's not going to make excuses because at the end of the day, he decided to go in there a little sick and decided to go in there against a guy who did miss weight by a few pounds, and he showed up, and it didn't work out for him. He definitely was off his game, and he definitely deserves a loss for the performance. But maybe this was a case of trying to get back in there too quickly, because it was only back in October, 2 months ago, that he got caught. So maybe this was a case where he could ask for a reprieve. I don't think too many people would have said much, especially after Borg missed weight. He was given it out, but that shows you, again, what type of warrior he is, because he decided to go through it anyway. Didn't work out for him, and because of that, he's definitely going to get another fight against a good opponent because of that. And for Ray Borg, he gets the victory, but with the missed weight, to me, it doesn't help him as much had he actually gone in there and made weight and beat Louis Smolka. So, or beat, I should say, and beat Louis Smolka like he did make weight. So, Ray Borg, still a guy that put a good performance, but again, a performance that wasn't the greatest. It was good enough to get a victory, but again, something that he's still going to have to work on, because he, again, showed good grappling, but you got to see those well-rounded skills, because if that's all he can do, there's a lot of guys who can do this in division I think are better than him, so he's going to have to still work on his stand-up a little bit, but other than that, and obviously he's got to make weight. That's definitely what he has to do moving forward. Dong Hyun Kim against Khalid Saffiedine. Not the fight I expected. You know, Dong Hyun Kim I thought would try for some takedowns, and he did. Ended up attempting 8. However, thought also we would maybe see a little more of kind of the crazy, wild Dong Hyun Kim going for finishes. And I really think, other than maybe a brief appearance there in the third round, for the most part, we saw him trying to clinch. A decent amount of output. I mean, 138 strikes in 15 minutes. Saffiedine, I think, was waiting too much. I think he was waiting too much for Kim to come to him, trying to counter. Kim's a really big dude, can control. Saffiedine then tried to attack Kim with the takedowns. I mean, he attempted 6 takedowns. That's a lot. He did land 2. All of them were in the first round, however. That maybe threw Kim off his game a little bit. However, in rounds 2 and 3, only 2 takedown attempts by Saffiedine in those final 2 rounds combined. So he kind of abandoned that a little bit. In the first round, you could make a case he won. Second round, second and third, I probably would have gave both to Kim. I think the third round was close, but the 2 takedowns of Kim gave him the round. And I definitely was scored at 29-28 Dong Hyun Kim. This was a split decision. And really, neither had just had a great performance. Nothing really stood out. I mean, 3 of 8 takedowns, 2 of 6. Again, nothing was really great by either fighter. I think both were kind of waiting. I think both were tentative. Both seemed gun-shy. For Kim, he hadn't fought in over a year, so I don't know if there was a little octagon rust in there. And for Saffiedine, he is a guy that is normally a counter-puncher. But other than the first round, to me, it didn't really seem like he was going out there and attacking. And after kind of rising to prominence, after losing to Tyron Woodley in 2011, where he rattled off 5 consecutive victories, beating the likes of Scott Smith, Taylor Stinson, Roger Bowling, Nate Marquardt, and winning his UFC debut against Hung-Gyu Lim. He has now lost 3 out of his last 4, with his lone win coming over Jake Ellenberger in January of this year. He also, however, the losses are to solid guys. He did get knocked out by Rory McDonald. He also lost to Rick Story and now Dong Hyun Kim. So he's not fighting pushovers. He's definitely fighting solid guys. But really, in the last 2 fights, to me, what I have seen from Khalid Saffiedine is just the lack of urgency, a lack of really going out there and trying to put a stamp on the fight. And I really think that's why he's lost both the Rick Story and the Dong Hyun Kim fight. Never really tried to take over. He wasn't trying to push anything, and never really trying to assert his will on his opponent. He was kind of letting the fight happen, and I think that's what cost him the fight. You know, nothing significant really happened from him, and that's not saying Kim was, oh, he was amazing, and Kim was doing the same thing too. He was just being a little more, like I said, in the third round, you saw him go for it a little bit more. He tried a few more takedowns. He was just doing a little bit more. Saffiedine wasn't that far behind him, but sometimes you gotta go for broke. I mean, coming into that third round, it's probably 1-1, and again, Kim kind of went crazy a little bit, and that's probably what gave him that extra judge giving him the fight, whereas Saffiedine just kind of was just sitting back. To me, you got to have a sense of urgency sometimes in fight, and you can't just kind of coast back thinking, oh, I got this in the bag or whatever. You got to always act like you need that round. It's the last round of your life, especially when you're in a fight that's super close like that where neither guy has stood out. And to me, Tarek Saffiedine didn't have kind of that little extra oomph in that fight, and it doesn't surprise me that the judges went the way of the stun gun. Next fight of the evening, TJ Dillashaw against John Lineker. Pretty much what I thought it would go, that TJ Dillashaw would kind of revert back into more of a wrestling-based fighter, wouldn't make this more of a 50-50 fight on the feet, even though I think he could go 25 minutes standing up against John Lineker and beat him. However, might as well do what you think you can do to get the easiest path of resistance, and that's attacking him with takedowns. 5 of 6 on the takedowns, landed 1 in every single round, outstruck Lineker 177-51 through 250 strikes in 15 minutes. Absolutely ridiculous. Lineker did land 51, did land 1 takedown of his own briefly there in the first round out of 107 attempts, but this was just mainly a washout here by Dillashaw. With his added footwork and head movement training under Dwayne Bang, he has been able to take those wrestling skills and change levels and make those takedowns a lot more unpredictable. And the pace and conditioning that he puts up, again, Lineker lucky this is a 15-minute fight, because 25 minutes, he definitely probably would have been finished. Now, TJ did play it safe. He didn't really do anything too crazy. Didn't throw that many huge power shots. He just put a nice, solid pace that, to me, again, like I was saying in the preview, he just amps up. He kept on amping up, and again had his most dominant. I guess the second round is probably the most dominant. I mean, he outstruck him 98-131. He landed 98 of 131 attempts, and outstriking him 98-19 there in the second round. So he maybe dipped a little bit in the third after a dominant second. But I mean, what I'm saying is he's the guy that does go up as the fight, and he just set a tremendous pace. Lineker wasn't able to match it. He walked away with the victory, and we'll get to the co-main event here in just a second, but Dillashaw, to me, gets the next shot. I know Dominic Cruz has had the title, just had the title. You know, it wasn't a completely one-sided fight, but to me, Cody Garbrandt for sure won that fight. It was not as close as the Cruz-Dillashaw fight, where you could have made more of a case for an arena rematch. And because Cruz has had injury problems, he was out for so many long, even though if you add up total time, he's been champion for a while, again, was the first ever UFC bantamweight champion. I don't think the UFC really owes him that much favors. I think Cruz probably fights one of the other top contenders, maybe a John Dodson, maybe a John Lineker, Rafael Sunciao. Jimmy Rivera actually has a pretty big fight coming up. Michael McDonald's out there. Maybe a super fight rematch thing with DJ. I don't know. We'll see. But I think Cruz fights one more time. He's right back in the picture, which again would be an excellent rematch against TJ or Cody. And again, I think TJ's going to be fighting for the title next. Now getting to that co-main event. To me, this was there's only a few things that Garbrandt did wrong, but minor details. Now, Cruz did outstrike Cody 95-71. He actually threw 100 more strikes than Cody Garbrandt. 95 out of 298, incredible pace, and 71 to just 198 for Cody. However, Cruz landed 0 takedowns. That was a huge X factor I thought in this fight would be the wrestling of Dominic Cruz. Now I know I said Cody did have a high school wrestling background. At one point did have a scholarship to wrestle at Ohio State University before he turned professional in mixed martial arts. But I thought the way Cruz moves in and out with his changing levels, his feints, that could be an area where we could see Cruz really dominate Cody, who really hasn't had his wrestling credentials tested much inside the UFC. Now, when it was move around and shaken, I interviewed Cody before the fight. He said it's always been easy to break down Dominic Cruz, that it would be harder for Cruz to dance around for 25 minutes than it would be for him to land 1 or 2 of his power strikes. And the only reason I picked Cruz is because even though I had Cody on the show, I've had him before, I am a fan of his, again, an Ohio guy, but I thought because Cruz has done that so many times with so many people, avoiding all those shots, not really getting touched, and be able to come back and land, again, punches and bunches. I mean, 298 out of the 20-minute fight is an incredible pace. I thought that would be the winning strategy, even if he decided not to take Cody down, or, in this case, get shut out of 7 attempts. What I didn't expect was Cody, to me, had a great game plan. He did not chase Dominick Cruz. He did not overthrow on Dominick Cruz. He did not try to tire himself out. He paced himself very well. He stood right in the center of the octagon, just stood there pivoting, and waited for Cruz to come to him. Cruz, again, was throwing a lot of kind of wild and looping shots a little bit, trying to come at those crazy awkward angles. It seemed like Cody had the timing down perfectly on a lot of those, waited for his chance. Now, again, 198 is pretty good for 25 minutes if you really think about it. However, it's still 100 less, but he was picking his shots smart. Even though he landed 24 less strikes than Dominick Cruz, he was picking his spots well. He was making runs from the center and keeping Cruz on the outside, making those runs with strikes when he saw the opening and the chance to do so. When he was able to got an angle, he made the run, but he always came right back to the center of the cage. He didn't stay on the outside, didn't allow Cruz to get on the outside. And Cruz, for a guy that has a lot of footwork and movement, either, one, didn't recognize that Cody kept on coming back to the center. Two, just wasn't trying to get him from the center. And three, maybe because of his incredible footwork and head movement, the way he's really been able to dominate everybody else, maybe was overconfident that he could just stay from the outside all day and not worry what Cody was going to do. I don't know, but for a guy that does a really good job of breaking people down when he's an analyst, it just seemed to me as a guy sitting from the outside that if I can see that, what Cody's doing, going to the center, picking his shots, allowing Cruz to come to him instead of what most people do and try to just chase Cruz, you think maybe it's because no one's done it before. I don't know, maybe Eric Crouch didn't recognize it, the head coach there. I don't know, but something to me was missed there. I don't know if it was just coaching, just Cruz, or what, but Cruz seemed kind of content. Now, however, we're also talking about a guy who got his bell rung a couple of times there. And once you get your bell rung once, you're not returning to that same level of mental activity. And I think Cody just kept on waiting, picking his spots. Now, there were a couple instances, I think it was in the third and fourth round, where Cody did drop Cruz. He kind of pointed at him. He was doing some dancing. And I think those areas really, to me, were the only negatives for Cody. He kind of took his foot off the gas a little bit. And I think he potentially could have ended the fight in those couple moments. But instead, he was kind of trying to pull like a Mark Hunt walk-off sort of deal. And to me, that's really the only negative of this for Cody Garbrandt, was he was kind of letting being a showman and the entertainment aspect maybe get in the way of winning the fight. Now, he did win the fight. But again, at those moments, you don't know how the fight's going to go. One punch can change a fight, one kick, one takedown, and all that. So that, to me, was the only thing, is that maybe Cody took his foot off the gas a little bit. But otherwise, an incredible performance. Like I said, he was able to figure out Dominick Cruz when no one was able to. And for the rematch, if that happens down the line, Cruz is going to have to adjust to Cody staying in the center, pivoting, finding those angles to create runs, and obviously, getting shut 0 for 7 on takedowns. He's also going to have to work on that as well, because that's not a typical Dominick Cruz performance. He almost lands one in every fight, so that's something he's going to. So Cruz is just going to have to make minor adjustments. He's still very game, still proves he's right in there. And for Cody, it's just, for a guy that has such a killer instinct, it's kind of surprising that he didn't jump on those opportunities. And I think given the chance again, he can't do it, because it's going to come back to haunt him. I mean, he's 11-0 now, but those are little situations that can kind of build up. And you do that against somebody like a Dominick Cruz or TJ Dillashaw, usually it can come back to bite you. And for Cody, let's obviously you hope it doesn't. You want to see guys succeed, but those are little things that could cause him to lose down the road if he doesn't correct them now. Main event of the evening, Ronda Rousey making her return after losing her championship last November, taking on Amanda Nunes, making her first title defense after defeating Miesha Tate at UFC 200 to become the champion, submitting Tate inside the first round at UFC 200. Nunes, coming on a roll, had won 7 of her last 8 fights, only losing to Kat Zingano which is a very close and crazy fight back at UFC 178 in September of 2014. After that, was able to beat top competitors like Valentina Shevchenko and Sarah McMahon on the way to fighting Miesha Tate for the championship. Again, like I said, submitting her in the first round. Take on Ronda Rousey. Everyone was wondering where she's going to be mentally, where's she going to be physically, is she going to be able to handle the just relentless nature of Amanda Nunes? Where's her boxing? Is she going to be able to get in the inside, make it more of a grappling match, more of a 50-50? And none of that. Some of that was answered. She really hadn't worked on her boxing technique at all, and if she did, very poorly. Her head was very up straight. There was not a lot of movement there, especially with the head. Her footwork was all over the place. It didn't seem like she was seeing the punches coming at all, not rolling with them, not keeping her hands up enough to cover, and officially landed 7 of 14. I think that's being generous. Didn't make much of an attempt, not credited with any takedown attempt. Didn't really, to me, make any attempt to try to get on the inside and try to get this fight to the ground where maybe it was a little more even. And Amanda Nunes was really able to strike from the outside, was really just kind of picking her apart slowly. Again, this is a fight that lasted 48 seconds, but she just kept on throwing. 47 strikes, that's almost one strike a second. Incredible. She just kept on throwing and just kept on landing. Ronda was doing nothing about it, and eventually all those punches accumulate there, had her up against the cage in a very bad spot. Herb Dean had to come in and stop this one, and just a very another dominant performance by Amanda Nunes. If you cannot stop her pressure, cannot stop her moving on you, you're going to get finished. That's what she does. It's kind of like what Ronda was doing early on. She would move forward, take you down, get you into submission, or as she was going, that reckless nature has eventually now been caught and figured out. But Nunes, to me, this is exactly what I thought she was going to do. Unless Ronda was going to be able to take a couple punches to get on the inside, or incredibly improve her footwork and force Nunes into a corner, that was really, or obviously last the first round and maybe use what is maybe perceived as a better cardio tank. That was the only way she was going to win. But Amanda Nunes, again, she's the type of fighter that really doesn't let too many fights get outside the first round. If you look at her UFC tenure, which started back in August of 2013, she's only had 2 fights go past the first round. She's 1-1 in those fights. All her other fights, she's ended in the first round, either by knockout or submission. So this is a girl that gets on you in a hurry, and then you're done. This is really how it goes. And it is incredible. And moving forward, obviously, she's going to have a tough challenge against Juliana Pena or rematching Valentina Shevchenko, who are set to fight here in the next few weeks. That's going to be a very interesting matchup. For Ronda Rousey, I would not be surprised if she retires. She calls it a curse. She already said before the fight on the Ellen DeGeneres program that she only had a few more fights, win or lose, here at UFC 207 against Amanda. Considering how this went down, she's already taken basically a year off from the sport, where her mentality already kind of was on a rocky edge. This doesn't help. One, losing doesn't help too, but losing the way she did in less than a minute is not going to be good for a girl who already didn't have solid confidence. Unless she comes back, she cannot have Edmund be her coach. I think it's proven that this dude is just not a great mixed martial art coach. Maybe he is for boxing or judo or whatever the case may be, but I think he has proven that he's just not that great of a coach. He doesn't know how to adjust game plans. He doesn't know how to help fighters grow in other areas. I think he's just good at building up people, talking a good talk, but he actually doesn't know how to coach proper technique. That's what it seems. I don't know what actually is going on in these training sessions. Maybe Ronda doesn't know how to apply them. I don't know what the case is, but I think it's proven that he's just not a great coach. And if Ronda wants to be a champion again, she has to go somewhere else. Where that is, I don't know. But it's not the Glendale Boxing Club with Coach Edwin Tartanian. That I can tell you for sure. My name is Jim Graham. Beyond the Cage right here on YouTube, youtube.com/Beyond the Cage podcast, where I'm also on Twitter, at Jim Graham, and Instagram at the Jim Graham. Please like Beyond the Cage on Facebook, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. We're almost to 500 likes and starting our 500 likes contest, so please go over there and do that. It's going to be voting on our MMA awards, which will be coming out here very shortly. So go to facebook.com/Beyond the Cage, like the page today, tell people about it, and you can see the pictures that will happen once we hit 500 likes that will be featured as prizes for voting in our 2016 MMA awards. Also, I'd like to thank my friends at themmmacommunity.com, MMA Fight Club on Facebook, facebook.com/MMA Fight Club. Izzy Garcia and Flying Brian J on Twitter, always supporting the show, and thanks for the retweets, gentlemen. Also, speaking of retweets, MMA Fight fans, as well as Legend of the Cage, always supporting Beyond the Cage, as well as Top Rated MMA, with tweets and shout-outs and support, and I support them with links there as well. Also, of course, the great AJ Hiller, MMAsignatures.co. Please check out the gear. You're looking for new Cody Garbrandt stuff. They actually just had Cody sign some stuff a few months ago. A lot of stuff still available on his website, so if you're looking with new signed memorabilia from the new bantamweight champion of the world in Cody Garbrandt, as well as the continued champion there of Amanda Nunes. He has some Amanda Nunes stuff as well, so hit up MMAsignatures.co for that stuff. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. It was an awesome 2016. Of course, I ended it with one of my biggest shows ever and of the year, having Michelle Waterson and Cody Garbrandt on last week's episode. So if you want to check out those interviews again, go to last week's episode there with Cody Garbrandt and Michelle Waterson. And thanks to all the continued support for Beyond the Cage. And once again, you can also listen to the show on iTunes and Google Play besides watching right here each and every week on youtube.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. So for myself, Jim Graham, thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.